Hello everyone, namaste and greetings for a bright weekend. Welcome back to your show, Manage Better. This is of course episode number 104, and many of you know that I started with the objective of doing about 10 shows. So it feels really nice that the journey has continued with your love and of course the generosity of the speakers who managed to come here. Before we get deeper into the show, if some of you who are on LinkedIn already can let me know that you can see me, hear me. You might not be pleased with the view, but this is all you get. So I would know that it works. Seems like LinkedIn is working and YouTube is also working. So yeah, good for us. Okay, so a little bit about the show, Manage Better. I started this series with the objective of bringing consultants, authors, practitioners, teachers, people who achieved something, done something which is worth sharing. And from their life, from their message, from their stories, we can take some inspiration and continue our journey. Right? And if some of us are sleeping and need a kick, they also get that through these shows. So a lot of speakers, as I said, 104. Uh, Two have been repeated, so the number may be a little here and there, but have been on the show and been very generous with their time and the investment that they make in this. I, of course, over the last 2 weeks, 2 months or so, I took a break because of owing to work pressures and all. Many of you may know, I work for a large IT services firm as a head of operational excellence. So that's my day job and sometimes weekend job as well. But I like doing this, and with a lot of reminders from many of you, I am back. Now I can see, yes, few people have listed that they can see me, hear me. So great, we are off. In the build up to this episode or show, I said that I posted also that if the Tata Group has been the moral compass for corporate India, Jamsetji Tata, more often known as J.N. Tata, is the lighthouse. For over 150 years, his principles have guided the Tata Group and corporate India in general. It is unparalleled across the world that somebody who started a group, even after 150 years, continues to guide and maybe as if, the spirit is lighting up the room in some ways, in a pleasant way. And that's the influence that J.N. Tata has had on the group. And today I have two fantastic Tata Group members, now retired, and authors also, multiple times authors, who've written a recent book on Jamsetji Tata. Here's the book. Fascinating read. I am not fully through it, but just about half came in earlier this week. And I thought that, this story and message needs to go to more people. And that's the reason I have this episode. And one good thing, one good news for you, all of you, is that many of you think that I speak a lot during my shows, well, today your prayers are answered. I can't show a lamp to the two stars who are on the show, so I'll be mostly quiet. And that gives me the opportunity to bring in Harish Bhat, who's the first speaker, one of the two speakers. I will introduce him a little bit and then bring him on the screen. Harish Bhat has worked with the Tata Group for over 36 years, many senior roles, including brand custodians of the Tata Sons, MD and CEO of Tata Global Beverages, Chief Operating Officer of the watches and jewelry business, which is Titan. Many other feathers throughout his long career. I would suggest that you check out his LinkedIn profile. He's a very prolific writer on LinkedIn as well. It will help you if you follow him there. He, of course, has been director on many of the Tata Group companies and still is. And avid marketer, Harish has helped nurture and grow many iconic brands, including from Tanesh, Titan, Fast Track, Tata Tea, and many others. And in his most recent role, he led the development and growth of the brand Tata, which is India's most valuable brand, and in many surveys, even globally listed as the most valuable brand across the world. In 2022 and 23, Forbes listed Harish as one of the top 10 most influential chief marketing officers in the world. It can't get better than this. So if you're watching this show live or even later, Harish is a very, very prolific speaker, very difficult to get his time. So we are glad that he's here today. Many other accolades, but worth to mention that he's a graduate of BITS Pilani and of IIM Ahmedabad. In 1987, he won the IIM Ahmedabad Gold Medal for Scholastic Excellence. And in 2017, which is recent, the Distinguished Alumni Award of BITS Pilani. He writes extensively and, like I said, more on LinkedIn as well. He's a top voice on LinkedIn as well for some years. So let me welcome Harish ji. Namaskar, Harish
Thank
ji.
you.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashman.
And
Thank you very much. Thank you for those warm words of introduction. It's a pleasure to be on Manage Better with you. Um, just one point I'd like to make. You're absolutely right. The Tata brand is India's most valuable brand, and it is the only Indian origin brand featuring amongst the top 100 brands in the world, as per the recent Brand Finance survey. So, thank you for mentioning that. It's been my pleasure and privilege to be part of the Tata Group for 37 years now. Thank you for having me on the show.
our pleasure totally. And that is a good segue into inviting uh, the other speaker. And Gopal sir has been on the show earlier. Uh, with one of his previous books. He has 17 books to his name. So, a very, very prolific writer. I will not be able to introduce him well if he's on screen, so I will do that when he's off screen. So, R. Gopalakrishnan studied physics at Kolkata University, IIT Kharagpur, and attended the advanced management program at Harvard Business School. He's been a professional manager since 1967, about 5 years before I was born. So that long a career, so much to learn from this man, and always generous with his time. He has served on as chairman of Unilever Arabia, MD of Brook Bond Lipton, and vice chairman of Hindustan Lever, and then as director of Tata Sons and several Tata companies, and also independent director of PTI Press Trust of India. In his very prolific second innings, I think last count he has 17 books, or this might be the 18th one. So, Gopal sir, namaste and welcome once again to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be on your show again. Just for the record, it's not. This was the 20th book. Not that it
So,
matters.
no, no, it matters to people like us who are struggling to write their first. I have three books started and can't get to, chapter two or three on any of them. So, if for nobody else, this episode will serve as a kick as in the backside for me. So with that, we will get the show. Uh, you both would have been on similar kind of conversations. So just some basic step. I have some prepared questions, and towards the end, second half of the show, we'll invite questions from the audience. And this is a reminder to everybody attending live that both gentlemen on the show are directors on Tata Group and other companies. So obviously it is unfair for them to be asked questions related to those companies. So please keep your questions to the group and the values and lessons we can learn from them, the life of Jamsetji, and anything related around book and books. So that's the reason why they are here, and we will do them some service by keeping our questions to that. Okay, so getting on with the broad question. So this is the book, the most recent 20th book for Gopal sir, and I think seventh or eighth for Harish ji. Uh, why do we need to even study Jane Tata today? I mean, we are in the age of startup, AI. Surely somebody 150 years ago may not be so relevant today. Uh, What would be your response? And maybe let me go first with Harish ji and see what is his response. Over to you, sir.
Yeah. So I think, Anshuman, thank you for that question. Jamshedji Tata today is as relevant, if not even more relevant, than he was 156 years ago, because his simple ideas of creating an institution where the community is center stage, which can serve society, which can serve the nation, is so relevant in today's day and age for every entrepreneur and every company. But truly, Anshuman, let me say that the idea of this book came from my co-author and my senior colleague in the Tata Group, Mr. Gopalakrishnan. So I'm really going to pass on your question to him because the idea came from him, and then I supported him in the writing of this book. So I'm going to request Mr. Gopalakrishnan to tell us what gave him the idea of the relevance of this subject today. Mr.
Sure.
Gopalakrishnan, over to you. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Harish. Thanks, Anshuman. Uh, your question was why is he relevant? And in a sense, I read a very fascinating book by Rajmohan Gandhi on his grandfather, Mahatma Gandhi.
Mm.
And the title of that book was Why Gandhiji is Still Relevant. And while I'm not the grandson of Jamsetji Tata, who was approximately a contemporary of Gandhiji,
Of Gandhi.
in fact, he was older than Gandhiji, uh, the thought passed my mind that is Jamsetji Tata still relevant for Indian business? That's how it all started. And in my own personal view, and I hope this will not be mistaken to be the view of a Bhakt. Nowadays,
Mm.
Bhakts are very common. If I looked at the 20th century, 19th century, who are the great Indians? Clearly, in the field of public affairs, Mahatma Gandhi will feature. In the field of literature, Rabindranath Tagore will feature. Uh, in the field of enterprise, it is unquestionably Jamsetji Tata. And if he is one of the great Indians of the previous century or the 19th century, then how come he's not held in that esteem? So, in my mind, I started working on this and I came to the view that his distinction is in two parts. And this is a very important part of our discussion and our book. The first part is he made community center stage when enterprise everywhere was called capitalism and accumulating money for the founder. So he was very distinctive. But more importantly, he set up a system whereby that idea could flourish for 156 years. That is unparalleled. I mean, Andrew Carnegie started his company, Thomas Edison started his company, Alexander Graham Bell started a company, um, Rudolf Siemens started a company, approximately plus minus some years. But they have all uh, wonderful companies, but the founding principle has not stayed true for 156 years. So it is like seeing an old Japanese man at 125 who still does exercise. And you say, well, what is special about this guy? And that's what caused us to say, let's not describe his life because historians, academics, journalists have done that. There's no point repeating it. Let us try to see what we can learn. How is he relevant today? In fact, the original title of this book, working title, was Why Jamsetji Tata Still Matters. And from there, through various combinations and permutations, we have arrived at the title that the book now bears. So the core idea of what you're asking was in fact the genesis of the book.
Hmm. So, so pleasing to know that because while while we are talking of the book and the life in past tense, but this is one of the lives that already 150 years and looks good for another 150 years at least. There is uh, clearly no looking back for his principles in life, and having worked indirectly with the group in some capacity here and there, I've seen all of this play out in real life. So, and you two have, for so long been associated with groups, so I'm sure more intimately. Okay, so we'll move on to the next part, and as I was reading the book, and I, like I said in the introduction, I'm just about close to half of it. That um, very interestingly, the book is of course organized in 10 chapters, all starting with the letter P, but that of course is a good wordplay. But my interest was more in the topics being organized and how many of them were purposeful, and there were so many lessons to be drawn from there. But Harishji, question to you. What is your favorite story or lesson that you draw out of the the whole writing experience that you had? Of course, there must have been a lot of research, and maybe some stories and lesson didn't make it to the final thing.
Yeah.
So, what is your
So
favorite?
yeah, so of all the stories that we have narrated in this book, and there are close to 30 stories which have been narrated in this book. The way this book is organized, there are 10 P's, like you rightly pointed out: philosophy and purpose and people and persistence and profits with responsibility and so forth. And for each of those P's, there is an introductory essay which talks about what that P is, what we can learn from Jamshedji's life and his ideas flowing through the group over 156 years in respect of that particular P, let's say purpose or people. And then that's followed by three stories. One story from Jamshedji Tata's age, one story from the medieval age, say when JRD Tata was chairman, one story from the modern age of the Tata Group. Uh, my favorite story, because it is the first story, particularly because it's the first story, is the story of Empress Mills at Nagpur. It was the first greenfield enterprise founded by Jamshedji Tata, the first greenfield industry that he set up. And it was set up in 1874, Anshuman. Empress Mills was set up in Nagpur. It was a textile mill. It became one of the most profitable companies of its era. Like I have said here, if you read it, you will see the kind of returns that the Empress Mills gave to its shareholders uh, way back then. Multiples of the share capital that was invested within a very brief period of time, within the first 10, 20 years. How did Jamshedji Tata make it so profitable? He used the best quality of cotton, long stapled cotton. He used the best technology. He used ring spindles, which even British textile mills were not using at that time because they thought it was risky. He brought them to the Empress Mills at Nagpur, and it helped take up the productivity of the mills greatly. But the reason we have narrated this story here is not because the Empress Mills were amongst the most profitable companies of their time. It is because of what else Jamshedji Tata did at Empress Mills. By the 1880s, Anshuman, Jamshedji Tata had introduced in the Empress Mills the concept of a gratuitous pension fund for employees who had spent a minimum number of years in the mills. And these were semi educated, uneducated men and women from the hinterlands of Nagpur who were working in the mills. By the 1890s, he had introduced in the Empress Mills an accident insurance scheme for the workers. By 1901, he had introduced in the Empress Mills for the first time ever in India something that all of us who have received salary slips in India know: the concept of a provident fund. More than 100 years ago, Empress Mills had a creche for the children of working women. By 1921, the directors of Empress Mills had sponsored a girls' school for girls' education in Nagpur, which exists and flourishes until today, the J.N. Tata Girls' School at Nagpur. He had pictographs for educating workers. He had people coming outside to give lectures. He had night classes. He had gymnasia in the mills. And people came and asked him, Mr. Tata, why is all this money being wasted on worker welfare? Are all these profits not belonging to the shareholders? And he famously said something in 1895, which has been captured in this book, which has been captured in this book very well. And what he said is that, we are not more philanthropic, we are not more generous than other people. We don't consider that. But we consider that we started this business on sound and straightforward business principles. We do know that our wealth belongs to our shareholders. But we also think that the health and welfare of our employees is the surest foundation for a prosperous tomorrow. And what he was laying down there, Anshuman, was the foundation of the philosophy of the Tata Group, which is that the health and welfare of the employees, and by extension of the community, and in his own mind, the community took the larger shape of the nation, is what is most important. He gave us that purpose. The purpose being that the community and the nation are center stage, that making very good profits, having a very good economic engine is only a way of meeting that purpose. So for that reason, I think what happened at Empress Mills remains my favorite story. It is also, in my view, a founding story of the Tata Group. Of course, there are many, many other interesting stories in this book, and I hope I'll be able to narrate a couple more during this conversation.
Sure, and that is a reminder. Those who found this story fascinating, there are 29 more in the book, and of course, these are the chosen 29, 30. There are many, many more, and this is more than a story because this is the foundation of a globally respected empire, and that's why I've always been fascinating with. And for some time, I worked at Flora Fountain, which is next to Bombay House. So
Yeah.
for us, it was like this is the place which kind of set the Indian industry on its tracks. So thank you for that fantastic story. Before I come to Gopal sir with the same question about your favorite story, I think uh, I'm an industrial engineer by qualification, and we were taught about Taylor, Frederick Winslow Taylor, and how he changed the separation of work and finding scientific ways and all. I have often argued that it was already being done in India by with under the guidance of J.N. Tata at that time with the Empress Mill and then later on the Iron and Steel Company. So a lot of undue credit goes to people like F.W. Taylor, of course, not to belittle his contribution, and Henry Fayol and other management scientists who claim almost singular credit for all the management work that was done in that period. There was being this work being done in India. Gopal sir, over to you. Your favorite story and lesson from the book, or maybe even something that is not in the book also.
No, I'll keep it to the book. That will be a good discipline. One of the questions that I'm often asked by B school students, whom I interact with quite a lot as part of my work, is sir, no doubt that Tata is a wonderful story. Have they done everything perfectly? Are they perfect? Can you tell us some of their faults? And that set me thinking and led to one of the stories in the book. There is one more, but I'll keep it to this one. And there's a story I would like to narrate. Unlike, hello, hello, hello,
Yes,
am
sir,
I
you're
audible?
audible. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're audible.
We can hear you
This,
now.
Yes,
There
yes,
was a
you're
brief
audible.
interruption, but it's all good now.
shall I carry on? Um,
Yeah, please.
so Harish narrated a story of Empress Mills, which goes back to the 1870s, and it's about perseverance, what he did with profit, and how his philosophy came. I want to come to the 2000s, 1990. It is not Jamsetji Tata, but Ratan Tata, and it's a episode where I was first hand at the table, though I was not the primary actor. I was an observer, close observer. We had a mistake in one of our companies called Tata Finance, a governance mistake. I mean, okay, a managing director went rogue, and we recognized there was a discussion with Mr. Tata that listen, when you're running a large company, sometimes somebody will go wrong in spite of your best efforts. It is better to admit your mistake rather than compound it by hiding it. So we meaning Tata Group set up under the uh, leadership of our then CFO Ishat Hussain, my esteemed colleague, a full forensic audit. I'm not going to go through all the details because it's in the book. And we blew the whistle on ourselves when the whistleblower policy had not yet become a common terminology in corporate governance. And of course, we got a lot of bad press for it because media love a show. That's their job. They were doing their job. And then we finally uh, came to a point where there was a debate. Uh, what is the size of the hole? And frankly, we didn't know. And the final bill came to Tata Sons board, and I was present at the table. It was 800 crores. And although legally speaking, our liabilities were limited by the Companies Act, we said we won't let our people who gave money to Tata Finance suffer. And Tata Sons picked up the whole amount. Now, the purpose of my telling you this story is not to say Tata is wonderful, it is not to say Tata is perfect, but to give a lesson in life. गलती तो सबसे होती है, कोई इंसान ऐसा नहीं है जिससे गलती नहीं होती है, कोई कंपनी नहीं है जिससे गलती नहीं होती है. But how many companies admit to their mistake? You're seeing in the public charcha now, various companies being mentioned from time to time, go on having probes and studies.
Yeah.
And everybody first denies it. We also first denied it because it was a shock to us. But very soon, we said, "Bhai, galti ho to maan jao." That is gentlemanliness, that is conduct, that is transparency, that will generate trust. And so we looked like a fool. If you remember the media of 2000, 2001, 2, Tata's looked like a bunch of idiots who don't know how to manage their business. But in a sense, 25 years later, I am proud that I worked for a company that collectively had the courage to say, "मैंने गलती किया है," and we would pay
Yeah.
for it. So that's my
I
favorite
think
story.
this is a fascinating one, Gopal sir, because I was working in Bombay at that time, or Mumbai, and in the same Flora Fountain area as well. So there was a you know more neighborly interest in this unfolding of the story. And I'll tell you the public sentiment and people observers like us, we were always like this group can't go wrong. So if something has gone wrong, ठीक है, like you said, it happens. But if anybody can be trusted to first identify, admit, and fix it, this is it. So that's the trust that the group has, and I'm sure people who read this book will get more details on this, and maybe learn more from that. So thank you for this. It is one of my favorite stories as well of the entire group, and so many of them. Harishji, your Tata story. I have an autographed copy of your Tata Stories book as well. So somewhere here, uh, but these are some of the fantastic ones. And the more important part is that we can all learn from it in 2024. Uh, somebody, Harishji, you ran into somebody called Alfonso yesterday, and so he's saying his hi. Uh, such
No,
a
no. So
small
I,
world.
yes, it is a small world. I did meet Alphonse at the Mumbai airport yesterday morning. I think on my way to Bangalore, and we discovered that we studied in the same school at Kollam in Kerala. It's a small world
Ah,
indeed.
fantastic, fantastic. Is that you are currently in Bangalore? Does that
Yes,
mean?
I am speaking. I am speaking from my home in Bangalore just now. That's correct.
So I will correct my mistake of many years and come and personally meet you. Because I've been in Bangalore now for 18 years, and I always assumed that you are in Bombay. So my mistake, ये भूल
No,
सुधार,
no, no.
I
Your
will.
assumption was right. Till a few months back, I mean, I have been based in Bombay for many years of my career with the Tata Group, but I am currently, for the last several months, I've been in Bangalore.
ठीक है, so अब भूल सुधार I will do. But moving on with the show quickly, the next, and keeping it with the theme of the book as well. Both of you have written multiple books, but writing such a book, uh, and I'm assuming you were not sitting in the same room and office writing this book, which is quite unreal these days. It's not possible. So must have been written over phone calls, over Zoom calls, or whatever, and conversations. But how is it to write a book on somebody who lived, of course, more than 150 years ago, and you are not writing from a historical perspective. You are not chronicling his life. You are actually learning or bringing out the lessons. What was the experience like? How difficult, how easy, particularly after having written other books as well, was this? Uh, quickly, Harish sir, first you, and then maybe same question for Gopal sir.
So I think one of the best things that happened when this book came, Mr. Gopalakrishnan called me and invited me to co-author the book with him. This was in November 2022. But by the time he did that, I think the concept of this book had already been in his mind for a long time. The best thing that happened was that Mr. Gopalakrishnan was able to put a very good structure to the book. The peace
Hmm.
structure that you spoke about: philosophy, purpose, people, persistence, profits with responsibility. That structure was the scaffolding on which the book was built. And that scaffolding, Mr. Gopalakrishnan explained to me in our very first meeting on the book. I remember that meeting was in Bombay Gymkhana. Mr. Gopalakrishnan had just completed his weekend tennis in the morning, and then we had breakfast and discussed the scaffolding of this book. We also said during that meeting that this would be the scaffolding, but we do not want it to be a purely historical book. It has to be relevant to today's young reader. And then we agreed that we would that each of these pieces we would be able to explain in very simple terms to the reader of today, along with what lessons the reader can take away from it. The other big insight that helped us was Mr. Gopalkrishnan's view that we should not just make this book conceptual, but we should back it up with real life stories from the Tata Group. And there again, we agreed that the stories should be belonging to, yeah, broadly, to the ancient age, to the medieval age, and the modern age of the Tata Group, so that people can see how the philosophy or how each of these attributes has flown over the past 156 years. So that those were the discussions based on which this book began. And while co-authoring a book, it's very important that both authors clearly delineate their responsibility, and we did that in this case. Mr. Gopalakrishnan knew what he had to write. I knew what I had to write. There was a proposal that we put forward to our publishers, which they accepted. And based on that, I think each of us went ahead with our writing journeys, and each of us reviewed the other person's writings. And we were critical of the other person's writings, the changes that we wanted. Those are the iterations through which this book has grown. But what I think would be interesting to hear would be Mr. Gopalkrishnan's view of how the concept of this piece came into his mind, because that was the scaffolding on which the book was built, and he was in touch with the publisher long before I was on this book itself. Over to you, sir.
Well, amongst all the books I've written, uh, I have the greatest emotional touch with this book because it has no pretensions to being an intellectual exercise. Because many other books on Tatas have been. Journalists have written, economists have written, historians have written. Indeed, Tata managers, Tata top leaders like Ramadurai, like Shamal Gupta, like C.K. Venkat, sorry, who have been operating CEOs of companies and big companies, they've also written books about the company. But when you write about a company, it is like writing the autobiography of your father or your family. But when you're writing about uh, uh, the the Tata concept and how it has survived, it's like writing about religion. It is not physical things. There is belief, there is faith, there are examples. And I was very inspired by the prachar of religions. When I saw whatever happened for Christianity or Hinduism or Islam happened 1,000, 2,000, 4,000 years ago. But all of them have survived. How did those stories survive? They survived because there's a very simple philosophy attributed to somebody, maybe uh, Vedas or Muhammad or Jesus. That philosophy was propagated to a large number of people who accepted it, and that produced many great icons and many great stories. So you'll have the story of Ram, Lakshman, Krishna, and so on in each religion. And by the time the actual practice goes on today, it has come like the delta in the region in Bengal of a river into number of rivulets. So you'll say Jat, Path, Bhed, Bhav, Now, this is the way. It starts with a simple philosophy. There are huge icons and narratives, and then there are rituals. There are four parts to how religion is spread. Religion is an idea, it's a concept. People believe in it because they are exposed to the philosophy, but more importantly to the icons and the narratives, but very importantly on a day-to-day basis to the rituals. It's the same thing with the river. Okay. Now, when I looked at Tata, I found a lot of rituals compared to other companies I'm aware of. For example, everybody in Tata, remember, Tata is like having a blood transfusion of 25% of your blood every day or every year. Because we have about 800,000 employees, about 200,000 leave, mostly from the software side, and another 200,000 join, right? So it's imagine your blood being transfused. You have to make sure the incoming blood has got the same compatibility with the old blood. And so Tata has a inadvertently, I don't think it's by design, frankly, rituals. So we celebrate in every part of Tata's Jamsetji Tata's birthday, and everybody knows it's 3rd March, right? It's like knowing your father's birthday. Everybody knows JRD's birth anniversary is 29 July because एक समारोह होता है, there is a
Hmm.
occasion. People even abroad where we have acquired companies know because when you're invited, so it is like saying Deepavali comes, everybody knows. You may not know the detail of Deepavali, but you know कि वे पटाखा बजते हैं, नए कपड़े लेते हैं, इतना तो सबको मालूम है. So Tata's have the equivalent of Deepavali and Holi, which very few companies have. They at best may have a memorial for their founder on a particular day, एक माला चढ़ा देंगे, but उनकी कहानियां नहीं आएंगी. We got huge number of icons and narratives. It's not just the Tata family, but there are stories of JRD, there are stories of Jamshedji, there are stories of Sumant Mulgankar, Fakir Chand Kohli, under my nose, if I may use that word. Because TCS was not there when I began my career.
Yeah.
And under my nose, it has become the most prominent or amongst the most prominent companies of Tata Group. So when you see these things happening, you ask yourself, there are so many heroes in Tata. It is not one hero. And how
Yeah.
did they create so many heroes? But all compounded to the same philosophy. So it's like having a family of, 100 or 1,000 people, but their, their rituals may be different, but they are all committed to the same religion. Without any fatwa, by the way. There is no
Yeah.
fatwa
There
in
is.
Tata, right? So um it is Swayam Bodh. You come with
Hmm.
no bodh, then you get Swayam Bodh, then you get Atma Bodh. And this I found very remarkable. And that helped to construct the metaphor of the river. I have avoided taking the metaphor of the religion within the book because I may find the book is
Yeah.
banned or something, some other controversy. I don't want to be the equivalent of the Kangana Ranaut of Tata Group. But
I am now trying to imagine, sir. so, don't carry that analogy too far. Uh, but
but
yes, I get you.
by using the river metaphor, and the second thing that was very interesting from my point of view was I had to use my imagination because the kahanis are available to some extent as facts, as photographs, as letters, but you have to fill it up. And I actually undertook, I think Harish and I separately, not together, not by plan, went to the house where Jamshedji Tata was born in Navsari. It's a
Hmm.
small little house. You can think of 1839, the rooms are so small. But we went and it's being maintained. They said, यहाँ पे बैठा था, यहाँ पे खड़ा था. I went to his house in Esplanade House, which is opposite Bombay Gymkhana here. I went up unauthorized on a Sunday because the chowkidar didn't stop me, and went and saw the various rooms. And it was fascinating to see how he might have sat. I saw the dining table, कहाँ पे बैठ के क्या खाते थे. And then I took a walk because I couldn't hire a ghoda gadi.
Hmm.
I took a walk from Esplanade House down to Kala Ghoda, where I went to the Ribbon Club. The Parsis had a thing called a Ribbon Club, which still exists.
Yeah.
तो वहाँ पे मैंने कहा कि मुझे एक अनुभव दो. And they offered me mutton dhansag, which I had to turn down. So they produced vegetarian dhansag for me. And then I sat on that easy chair and I went to sleep for 10 minutes. Just token. And then I got up and walked across to the Watson Hotel where he used to visit opposite. So I went to the Brookwood Cemetery in Woking in the UK, where the Tata family is buried. I went to Père Lachaise in Paris to go and see where JRD was buried. And all this helps to create a little mahol, like we do Tirth Yatra. You go to Char Dham, You go to your ancestors' birthplaces. These are all creating feelings in you. So I had to sort of work myself up to think of these 10 P's. I don't claim originality because the story is fantastic. हमें ये it's a piece of luck or privilege, if I may use the word, कि ये कहानी सुनाने की हमें मौका दिया. कहानी तो in itself is very good.
Hmm.
So when people come and say to Harish or me, what a fantastic book it is, I say, भाई कहानी जब ठीक है तो हमने सिर्फ कैमरा चलाया है. But the kahani itself was very good. And that's what gives me
But
satisfaction. That's what gives me an emotional proximity to the subject. Not because I'm saying Tata is the greatest in the world. It is not appropriate for anybody to say that because there are lots of other great companies in the world. But in trying to say what is distinctive about Tata, we say these are the distinctive points, but never have we implied, and we still don't imply, that they are superior to any other company.
I think fascinating recollection of how this fantastic, and maybe this was required to write a book like this because otherwise you can't live that life and you can't actually live that life, but as close as you can get to that. So thank you much,
Yeah, so
sir.
just to finish this,
Hmm.
Anshuman, I
Hmm.
also conjured up in my head that there was a panel discussion,
Ah.
right, in heaven. And the people sitting around the table were Jamsetji Tata, who was the first chairman, his son Dorabji Tata, the second chairman, Nauroji Saklatwala, who was the third chairman, and JRD Tata, who was the fourth chairman. And I
Hmm.
imagined that they're having a panel discussion कि आजकल हमारे बच्चे क्या कर रहे हैं पृथ्वी पे. And that is called chapter 9 or chapter 8, I've forgotten, in the book.
I think it
And I
it
wrote
is,
it out.
but
I wrote it out
uh,
based on facts. And I wrote out even there's a philosophy कि भाई हमारा काम खत्म हो गया अब बच्चों के हाथ में छोड़ दो. And I had to give it that Parsi Gujarati intonation. So I went to
hmm.
my good friend Homi Khusru Khan and said, how would people address each other? Because I will say bhai,
Hmm.
but Parsis
uh,
don't say bhai, they say dikra.
uh,
So I got a little Parsi intonation also into that chapter. And if you read that chapter, I'm very happy with that chapter because I produced a little intonation in Parsi Gujarati and brought out the philosophy over a period of 100 years through a panel discussion. These are the points of imagination that give me great satisfaction.
so I will take the liberty of correcting you. You just 5 minutes ago said that there is nothing original in this. This chapter is certainly totally original. Nobody has ever written, thought of it. So, anybody listening now live, and of course later on, if you watch the recording, uh, you may have heard of or you may have read about G.N. Tata stories in other books, but you would not have imagined a panel discussion in heaven. So, for that alone, this book is a worthy read. I am looking forward to it. I have seen the chapter, but I decided no, it needs a better time and moment for me to read it. So it's there. Okay, we have some questions coming in, and I will try and take.
But Anshuman, I want to add two
Sure,
things to what
please,
Mr.
sir.
Gopalakrishnan said about the
Please,
writing of
please.
this book. Okay, one I want to add in all the stories we have narrated this book, we had to be absolutely true to the facts of the stories, and I would like to acknowledge the support and the inputs that we got from the Tata Central Archives at Pune. The
Hmm.
Tata Central Archives in Pune are the storehouse of information, storehouse of historical facts about the group. In fact, if your listeners on this show want to visit the Tata Central Archives at Pune, they're open to visitors as well with prior appointment. You can just go to the Tata Central Archives website and check it out. So that's the first thing. The second thing is this imaginary chapter about the discussion between Jamshedji Tata, Dorabji Tata, Navroji Saklatwala, which happens, and JRD Tata. It's a beautiful chapter. It's come out very well, and I think it has potential to become an entire play, a theater play all by itself, because it's been written so well by Mr. Gopal Krishnan with all the Parsi diction, but the content is also very very compelling. So I hope one or two theater directors are watching this show as well.
I will try and reach out to a couple of them. I know it is already put the chat on fire, so you can see Aniket Rai is saying this could be a viral trend, um, and there are 5 6 comments, but I'm just placing two. What imagination? So I think as people who want to discuss books, I discuss a lot of books. You are always wondering, will I be able to bring out something that neither the authors thought about in the conversation or the listeners of the show expected? So we achieved that with this viral trend that you mentioned. There is another one. So on the panel discussion, there are some questions. I will take one or two only. So Narendranath Baliga is asking about, based on the extensive experience and domain exposure of both of you, do you plan to write on contemporary leaders? So, Mr. Baliga, Gopal sir has already written about several contemporary leaders as well. So, if you check his other earlier books as well, you will find some. But do you want to take a minute, Gopal sir, to respond to
No,
this?
just to say that actually the idea of the Jamsetji book came out of my work on the contemporary leaders. So
So,
I put the cart before the horse. What happened was I did a piece of research with some academics in the SP Jain Institute, and I said, why does India have so few institutions, enterprise institutions? I'm talking business
hmm,
institutions, not parliament and courts and so on. And we defined what's a good institution. And just like you identify talent by saying if these characteristics are there, the person may have the potential to rise to high levels. I chose companies which started after my career began, which means
hmm,
they're 50, 60 years or less in age. And I wrote to 10 CEOs, six of them agreed to take part in our research. And we wrote six books. Now, some of the Mr. Baliga looks quite young in the picture compared to me, at least. And so I reckon that you may be surprised to know that these companies are quite so young. They all began around 1967 or later. TCS, Kotak Mahindra Bank,
HDFC,
HDFC
yeah.
Limited, Biocon,
Iocon.
so on, Biocon, and Marico. And we researched it and wrote six books and wrote what makes them look like they have the potential. And from that potential, I transposed it, the model to Tata. That's how the 10 piece came to my head. I said,
Hmm.
yeah, Jamsetji Tata never talked to 10 piece, but उसने करके दिखाया है. And like it happens in science and technology, the practical use of it known to people long before the physics and the theory of it has come later.
Yep.
And that's how the idea came. So they are, I call them my all these seven books on building institutions, and I passionately believe that India needs 100 institutions, 200 institutions. We must have all these
Okay.
startups, but one day startups will become grown-ups. Will they become institutions? Just like we tell our children in the family, Dirghayush Bhava. Why can't we do that for companies?
No, and
Uh,
I think
Anshuman, I have a
sure.
slightly different. I have another take on Mr. Baliga's question. Okay, if you don't
Hmm.
mind, and
Please.
you know, my take is, this is not a historical book. It's not a book on pure business history. My view is that Jamshedji Tata himself is a contemporary leader. What is a
Hmm.
contemporary leader? A contemporary leader is a leader whose ideas are relevant to our day and age, to our times. He may have lived in the 1800s and in the early 1900s, but in terms of his ideas, you will see from this book that his ideas are perhaps even more relevant to today's age than they were at the time when he was running the Tata Group. So people who read this book should not read it only as a book of business history. They should read it as a book of contemporary lessons which are going to be useful in our own lives as entrepreneurs, as corporate managers, as leaders, as students of business. That's how this book has been written. And many people who have read it have actually told me this. I was narrating a story a couple of days ago about an entrepreneur who has read this book, and he has commented on LinkedIn saying that I have told my sons that for the next several weeks, next 10 weeks, each week we will discuss one chapter of this book, and we will see what lessons we can get from it and adapt it to our business. Not that they will use the lessons as they are, but they
As
will
they
see
are.
how they can adapt it to their own. That is very gratifying to Mr. Gopalakrishnan and me, to see that contemporary leaders and entrepreneurs are taking these stories, taking these lessons, and seeing how to adapt them for their business. That was the purpose with which this book was written.
And not my place and a position to offer a comment, but in any sense, if you see life that has flourished even 150 years after it was mortally in this on this place and looks good for another 150, surely has so much to learn from it. And if this generation, next generation, anybody coming across this can learn from it. I mean, so much is known and written about global authors or global, you can say, industrial luminaries of the world. Why not from India? And we have a lot of them, and that could help create many more.
Anshuman, I just
As
want
we
to
are
add, in line with the
sure,
contemporary thing of writing everything in Hindi,
ho
I
jaye.
would describe our journey. I think I include Harish in this, though I'm probably a bit more advanced in the journey. That you spend the first 20 years of your life doing Gyan Prapti.
Hmm.
The second 20 years of your life, you do Gyan Parivartan
Hmm.
because you realize that the way to use the knowledge is different. And you come to the last 20 years when you talk of Gyan Prasaran. And Harish and I have reached that stage now. From Gyan Prapti to Gyan Parivartan to Gyan Prasaran. And so what Harish just said really gladdens our heart because प्रसारण जो करने वाला है वो तो खुश हो जाता है ना कोई छात्र मिल गया तो
I I can already see another book coming from this Gyan Prasar. So, you might be the first invitee on my show who will come for the third time then. So we'll wait for that. But I'll take some comments from the audience, and I think Karthik Mehrotra is a long comment, but the summary is that he worked at Tata Archives for some time and is sharing his experience there. So thank you, Karthik, for that.
Anshuman,
Quite
that's a very interesting comment
sure.
that Karthik made. That
I'll
postcard with
bring
the
it up.
principles of JRD Tata, and I must tell the audience, these principles are actually contained in a very small, concise letter that JRD Tata wrote to a school teacher in Kolkata called K.C.
Hmm.
Bhansali. And some of the quotations from this letter feature in this book also. The school teacher wrote to JRD Tata asking him, what are some of the guiding principles of your life? And JRD Tata answers him, giving these daily principles, which has giving these guiding principles which have worked for him. So it's a beautiful beautiful letter to read, maybe less than 250 words in length, but lays out five or six principles that all of us can follow in our lives.
There you go. Nobody else to narrate a Tata story than Harish Bhat himself. So thank you, Karthik, for prompting that moment for me. Uh, Quite a few other comments coming in, but I just wanted to, before we have to end this at an hour. So we discuss, of course, where this all came from, how it started, and there is much more in the book as well. But how's the one question I've had is that how's the Tata Group today similar to the one JN Tata conceived and created, and maybe how is it different, if at all? So, Harishji, maybe first you.
Yeah, I will lead with a very simple answer to that. I think the values
Sure.
of the Tata Group are identical to what Jamsetji Tata envisioned at his time. He envisioned a group where the community was center stage, where what we do is for the community and the nation. And I think that guiding philosophy remains unchanged.
Hmm.
Until today, we are majority owned. 66% of the equity of Tata Sons is owned by the Tata Charitable Trusts, which means 66% of the dividends issued by Tata Sons go to the Tata Charitable Trusts, who use these funds for the setting up of hospitals. There are many hospitals fighting cancer being set up even as we speak. National institutions like the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, the fight against disasters like the fight against the pandemic, which happened a couple of years ago, and for many other purposes which are relevant to the nation. Also, the industries that we set up are so core to the nation. It would have been steel in the early 1900s or late 1890s. It could have been aviation in the 1930s, commercial vehicles in the 1950s, IT services in the 1960s, and semiconductors today. The nature of industries may change, but industries which are good for the nation and keeping the nation at the center have always been the philosophy of the Tata Group. So that philosophy has remained unchanged, the philosophy of the central purpose of the group. What has changed, Anshuman, is the surrounding layers, the kind of industries that we are present in. If you came during Jamsetji Tata's early years, you would have said the Tata Group is a textile company. A few years
Hmm.
later, you would have said it's a steel company. A few years later, you would have said it's a steel and aviation and power company. Few years later, you would have said it's an automobile, steel, aviation company and an IT services company. So the outer layers have changed, but the core of the group, the inner layers, which is the values, those I think have remained identical. So there is a sameness and a difference, and that has, I think, been one of the core reasons for the longevity of the Tata Group. But over to Mr. Gopalakrishnan for his views.
Well, Anshuman, I've just done the Janeyu for my grandsons. I've just come
Yeah,
back. It's hardly a week. And to the extent that my grandson is not going to behave after the Janeyu like my grandfather did. That's too
correct.
much to expect. World has changed. But I would hope that the core values
Stay.
कि भाई अपना कर्म करो, ध्यान से करो, दूसरों पे सहानुभूति के साथ जियो, those things will remain. And that's exactly what uh, Harish just mentioned. Intel inside has not changed, but
Hmm.
the appearance of the computer outside has changed. And that makes us who worked in Tata very proud. कि आत्मा नहीं बदलती है, बदन बदलता है. This is a
Hmm.
punarjeevan. And although people think of Tata as a Parsi company, I think it is a very remarkable example of rebirth and reincarnation.
In so many ways.
And
Uh,
that is something many companies have not been able to discover. कि पुनर्जन्म कैसा होता है? How do you keep the atma the same and keep changing the badan? And Tatas have not through something very clever, but by doing the right things at the right time in the right way. Tatas are more Hindu than Parsi, if I might summarize. But I'm saying that not in a religious or chauvinistic sense. I'm saying in terms of reincarnation.
Absolutely. And I think one, and we've had some conversations, Gopal sir, earlier, but your ability to bring one concept and then plant it into another, and total fan from the bonsai manager days. So, so that that was probably your first one,
It
first book
was.
or so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. So talking of books, and in the last 2 minutes of the show, Harish ji, what are you reading these days? And if you can share with our audience, other than this one.
Yeah, so I'm reading a fascinating book of fiction just now. I'm reading The Guide by R.K. Narayan. It has been my
Ah,
one of my favorite novels, so I've gone back to revisiting it. That's on my bedside table. And I'm also reading a book about how Bangalore city has evolved through the centuries, which is a book of non-fiction. So these are the two books which are on my table just now, and enjoying both of them. R.K. Narayan is my favorite author, and I wish I could even write 20 or 30% as well as he does. So that's what I'm reading just now.
sir, over to you. What are you reading these days?
I'm reading a book called Anthrovision by Gillian Tett. Gillian Tett is a Financial Times journalist. So she
Hmm.
writes about finance and economics, but she's an anthropologist by training. And while Harish and I have been business executives, I think our appreciation of anthropology has helped us to think very differently. So that's one book
Hmm.
that I'm reading. The second book I'm reading is again about imagination. Graham Hancock, who I'm
Yeah,
fascinated by
interesting one.
his views on how this world has evolved. And while he can't prove everything he has written, he's giving you enough evidence that there was a very rich civilization even before the Ice Age in 12,000. And in the same spirit, we are saying we can't prove everything we've written in the book, but we are providing evidence that some deep spirit has existed, and there will be likely to be more such companies. If we look for them, you'll find virtue everywhere. If you look for vice, you'll find vice everywhere. So that's why I'm reading Graham Hancock's book.
Fantastic. We are almost at the hour. I can't thank you both enough. Thank you very much. And like Hariji, I said, I will do that Bhul Sudhar and I will try and meet you personally since you are in Bangalore. And if I'm
Look
not
forward.
anytime soon in Bombay, sir, we will try and find opportunity to meet. But thank you well once again, and a good reminder to everybody who's been on this live event or will see this later. Fascinating book. Don't read it as history. This is very, very relevant today. I couldn't put it down. It came 2 days ago, and I'm already more than half through. I've kept aside what I was otherwise reading, and really amazing work, and so much so has gone into it. And the part I also love is that it is available in hardbound. I absolutely love reading hardbound books. I don't know why, but but that is another reason why I just said, okay, fantastic. For such a economical price, a hardbound is available. It will be on my bookshelf 50 years from now. I may not be around, but the book will be. So with that, I will let you both go. Thank you very much, and thank you to my audience. Next show next Saturday, same 11 a.m. on finding your second act. How, and we'll bring a fantastic coach on who helps you build your second act in your life. So with that, thank you and bye bye.
Bye. Thanks a
Bye.
lot, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you.